Trends get a pretty bad reputation in the world of slow and sustainable fashion, and while I'm not a huge fan of trends, I do think that if we look at them from the lens of elements of style and from our own personal style lens, they can actually become ways to express our own style authentically and to get creative with what we already have. If you find yourself always stuck in that cycle of wanting the next new hottest thing and then getting bored and like staying on that hamster wheel, then today's video might be for you. I'm talking about ways to get out of that cycle of constantly wanting the next big trend. One of the ways which I like to express my style authentically is through accessories, and that's why it is the perfect video for today's sponsor, Monica Vinar. Even if I am looking at things that are more current, I do tend to fall back on signature jewelry pieces, and a lot of them are coming from Monica Vinar these days. I've been wearing Monica Vinar jewelry for the past few years. Their unique aesthetic does feel fresh and current, but not quite trendy. It does have a really nice timelessness, which is evidenced for my personal style through like years and years of wearing them. So it holds its own amongst trends that only last for a few months. I am always re-wearing my Rolo chain, which I wear twice wrapped around my neck with my heirloom vintage pendants. And I recently added the large Baroque pearl to my pendant collection, which looks so good with the Rolo chain. I'm wearing that combination right now. Or worn on the snake chain necklace, which I can also add to my other necklaces and pieces for a really nice layered effect. I've also been wearing 2 stacked Dea gold domed rings, often when I feel like my outfit needs a little bit of a punch or if it's feeling like very basic. So these are starting to feel like a signature look to me, and I've recently added the silver Dea domed ring so that way I can mix my metals effortlessly. When it comes to their metals, Monica Vinar uses 100% recycled sterling silver and gold vermeil, and is slowly adding more traceable products to their inventory. These traceable products can be tracked all the way back to their origin, and you can find this on their website. A great example of this is the lab-grown diamond hoop earrings. You can click on the product passport to see the factories, the origins. Like all my sponsored content, this is not like a rush to buy. As I mentioned, a lot of these pieces are classics and they do repeat them over and over again because they are pretty timeless. I'll also link to my other Monica Vinar pieces that I've had for a while in the description box below. With that being said, let's jump on it. Before I get into the tips of how to get yourself out of that trend cycle, I wanted to touch on some of the psychological factors behind why it is so easy and why we want so much to partake in trends and shop trends. I think there are a couple of factors here, and I am by no means a psychology expert, but I do find consumer behavior as it pertains to our fashion consumption really interesting. And a few things that I can pinpoint are, number one, social proof. That is that trends prove that we belong to a certain clan. As individuals, as humans, we want to feel like we belong. We want that sense of belonging. But fashion does two things. It's like a double-edged sword. We also want to use fashion to express our own identity and individuality. However, particularly with the rise of social media and getting likes and that instant validation and feedback based on, in the fashion space, what we're wearing, this can really exacerbate that need for social proof and heighten that awareness and that sense of needing to belong. The other piece is instant gratification. And often instant gratification is exacerbated again by this digital age that we live in. If we want something, we literally have the ability to buy it and have it delivered to our doorstep in an instant. Our society and our behaviors have become so programmed in giving us that instant hit of satisfaction that this is now what we expect. Maybe we don't even wear it at all, but we've already received that little boost of dopamine, that little hit of satisfaction by purchasing the product and anticipating its arrival. And the more we do this, the more actively our brain is going to want to seek that reward over and over again. It's interesting that this doesn't really have anything to do with the trend in particular, but more our behaviors and these patterns and how we train our brain. I will leave a resource that I found really fascinating and helpful in the description box below if you're more interested in what I would call these, mindset shifts and triggers around our shopping habits. But now that we have an understanding of why we're so attracted to trends, both from that aesthetic social proof side and also just the kind of behavioral side of it, let's talk through some of the things that I have found incredibly helpful to sort of give myself distance from trends and wanting them. Now, this isn't to say that I don't make impulse purchases every now and then, that I don't find myself attracted to trends, or that I am completely immune to shopping altogether. Like, no. If you had seen me in that vintage store in Milan recently, you would also understand that it's totally normal to want novelty. As humans, that's also something that we crave, right? So these tips are definitely ones that I would recommend sort of taking with a grain of salt, seeing what works for you, and hopefully something sticks. This first tip is pretty ambiguous, but it came with reconnecting with myself and checking in with how I feel and how I want to feel on a daily basis. I think this comes from understanding who you are, what your wants and needs are, but where I think the shift needs to happen is, rather than asking yourself how you want to look in the morning when you're getting dressed, I would start asking yourself how you want to feel. This is something that I've been asking a lot of my clients when they're trying things on, when we're testing pieces, whether to keep something or, whether to declutter it, or even just when we're putting outfits together. The questions are always centered around, well, how do you feel in this? Is it how you want to feel? What this does is it separates ourselves from these external environmental factors and allows us to refocus and reconnect with ourselves. Sometimes I get lost in my fantasy life and I end up dressing without any functionality or practicality involved. I'm sure I can't be the only one. This one has been a big learning for me, and that is to take a realistic view of your daily life and dress for that. I think functionality is actually the foundation and basis of a lot of really cool and creative outfits. But as soon as we become more realistic about how we need to dress, our outfit choices can be so much more satisfying. And again, we separate that from the trends that we're seeing. As soon as we start thinking whether something is a realistic fit in our life and we stop shopping for our fantasy selves, then trends become a lot less appealing. A really good example, and one that I talk a lot about, especially with moms that are clients of mine, is earrings and accessories again. So for example, rather than wearing a big hoop that a toddler or an infant could pull on, as much as I love a nice gorgeous hoop, I think going for a little stud that still packs a little bit of punch. I love these heart ones, also from Monica Vinader. I've been wearing them on repeat, and actually I've been wearing them a little bit mismatched too. I'll wear them with a pearl stud and then a little heart. Keeps it interesting, keeps it fun, but also keeps it really functional when that's necessary. Be comfortable with who you are. Okay, I'm sure you're all rolling your eyes and being like, sure, Alyssa, that's just so easy. So easy. I'll be honest, sometimes I'm still not comfortable with who I am. So I get that this is a really big ask, but this kind of ties into that first point about reconnecting with yourself. I find the more comfortable we are in ourselves and the more we get used to asserting ourselves through a specific style that may or may not be current or trendy or, in line with what everyone else is wearing on Instagram and TikTok. That's okay. The more we become okay with that individuality piece and expressing it unapologetically, the easier it is to look at a trend, appreciate it for what it is, maybe take some elements from it that we like, get some inspiration, maybe we try it, but we don't have this insatiable need to wear it, to be part of that movement, simply because we know that maybe it's not for us, and that's okay. This next one is the biggest in my opinion, and that is to look at trends from the lens of elements of style that you really like. So for this, knowing the adjectives or the style descriptors that you really like and how you want to be seen in the world, I usually recommend to have 3 or 4 of these. Alison Bornstein's 3-word method could be really good for this. Amy Smelovich's style classes are also really good for this. She also likes to focus on having having 3 or 4 words that describe you, but I know that we are very, very multifaceted. So if the 3-word method, if that seems too rigid for you, then I would broaden that, zoom out a little bit, and figure out what 3 or 4 elements of style, things like texture, how color is used, key silhouettes that you like, key proportion plays that you find yourself gravitating towards, or even things like key styling techniques for accessories. Are you someone who likes really big, bold accessories, even though dainty jewelry's in, or when it was? You know, I remember when I would travel to Italy, so many women were still wearing like great, big, impactful pieces. So they knew what elements they liked and how they liked them on their person, and they kept on wearing them. But that's not to say that maybe they found colors of the season that they liked and implemented those in all of their jewelry stacks. So there are ways to take trends and include them into your day-to-day, but doing it in a timeless fashion. And the way to do that is through identifying your elements of style, your favorites, and seeing how the different trends that are currently happening can be translated through those elements. And you'll find yourself wearing any newer pieces so much longer. Okay, here's another one that takes a lot of mastery and practice and definitely depends on your level of consumption, of slow fashion, on knowing your shopping triggers. But sometimes I like to just window shop. If I'm curious about trends, if I just want to get an idea of what is trending, what is current, what is fresh, that way I can go home and style my pieces and restyle my closet based on the silhouettes and cuts and proportions and textures that I'm seeing, then I'm going into stores with a mission of window shopping, of trying things on, not buying anything, seeing what's happening. And this is kind of like going into a museum and appreciating art and taking it in and soaking it up and letting it affect you in whatever way you want, but not having to bring it home. I think one of my very first posts back in 2015, when I didn't even have a YouTube channel yet, was to shop with a list, kind of like how you do it at the grocery store. This was super helpful for me when I was trying to pull away from trends. I would, for example, put a trendy item that I really loved on my shopping list and I would just let it sit. Typically for 3 to 4 months or a season. I like to shop secondhand anyway, so I have to kind of wait for that trend to cycle through. And what I would often find is by the end of the season or by the end of the trend cycle or by the end of the year, I would look at that item on my list and it would no longer have any appeal to me. And again, it creates that separation between seeing, wanting, and buying. Something else that you can do if you're not shopping with a list, or if you are, is to simply wait 24 hours. I know this isn't like a novel idea at this point in time. Everybody's been talking about it, but it is solid and I do think it deserves being restated. There is really something to be said for waiting 24 hours before you make a purchase. You're allowing your brain to let go of the emotional trigger. You're giving your brain some breathing space too, which I find in today's world, we don't really give ourselves a lot of breathing room. We're always looking for the next thing. We're always scrolling. We're always seeking inspiration. Like, what if we didn't? What if we just stopped? What if we just went for a walk or like spent some time with our cat? Or played with the jewelry that we already had, you know, and got creative with what we already have? Or what if it's not even about restyling some of your pieces? What if it's just about like organizing it? Doing something that feels perhaps a little bit menial, but also quite meditative. We see a lot of trends on our favorite influencers, on our favorite celebrities, and I've started to ask myself the question, do I actually like the garment they're wearing or the outfit, or do I just like the person and their lifestyle? And even if you only ask yourself one question in this entire exercise of trends, especially if you're someone who gets their inspiration from on-figure outfits like TikTok and Instagram or Pinterest or wherever, ask yourself that question. Do you like what they're portraying? Do you like the overall image? You know, another second piece, kind of part 2 to this, is if you have time, what would this garment look like in a flat lay? Can you sort of go online, find the shop, find the off-model piece, put it in a little like collage with, you know, some clothes from your closet already, or just make a fantasy collage and see what that looks like off the body. See what that looks like once you've taken away the inspiration or the aspiration or the person or whatever, and see if that gives you a clearer sense of whether or not you actually like that piece. So that is what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know if you learned something new or if you liked it in the comments below. A huge thank you again to Monica Vinar for sponsoring today's video and for their support. And always thank you so much to you for your support, for showing up on Sundays. Don't forget, I've got that discount code for you in the description, but also all of the links do have the discount code already applied. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, or even if you just learned something new. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be back with another slow fashion video. Ciao!